All these other servants might as well step out the way. The child of prophecy, the one and only CASTORIA, is coming through. From the chapter, we know that she actually comes into the story nerfed. Oberon telling us that she gains more of her true power every time she rings one of the bells of pilgrimage, there being 6 of them in total. These bells have so much influence that every time she rings one, it can be heard throughout the entirety of Fairy Britain. Just her ringing one bell was enough for Morgan to view her as an enemy of the state, and she had some of the most power in the chapter. The first bell that CASTORIA rings is the one in Norwich. Habitrot tells us that this gave her enough magical energy to match Morgan's pinky finger, and as crazy as that might sound, that's actually supposed to be impressive, and that also just goes to show how strong Morgan is. The second bell of Salisbury made her slightly stronger than Babin Sith. Da Vinci also mentioned the fact that it increased her number of fairy magic circuits, saying that a good portion of this power comes from the increase in her number of nerves. By the time that she won the third bell in Gloucester, she was able to run straight through Babin Sith, who is very powerful in her own right. The fourth bell, that being the one of Orkney, made her surpass every run-of-the-mill fairy, putting her at a level where she could now only be trumped by somebody of high stature. The fifth bell, that being the one of Oxford, Oberon tells us that this gave her enough energy to cover the entire Round Table army on her own. And then the sixth bell, Londinium, was enough to put her on equal footing with Morgan herself. And we already know Morgan is one of the strongest servants in the verse, though Morgan herself claims to still be stronger. When we went to the Skyforge with Merlin, we find that she gained even more power, being able to forge the foundation for Excalibur while she was in the core of the planet, being one of the only people in Fate who could have done this. Muramasa's sacrifice allowing her to keep her spirit intact, despite the process usually needing her sacrifice. In her final form, she mentions that she's not King Arthur, but more specifically, she is the designated wielder of the sacred sword itself, practically putting her in a realm of the same wielder that took down Safar, considering that they would be the same thing. In a wrestling bout, she had enough physical strength to knock Oberon off his feet. In her confrontation with Bargus, you had Muramasa praise her for being able to land a solid hit. She was able to bring Grimmer the Sage to at least a stalemate in a sparring match, Grimmer being known for being Odin while he's incarnated in Ku's body. Odin also praises her for this fact as well. You had her deflect Babon Sif's magecraft at the last second, even when Babon Sif was the one that tried to sneak an attack. Even she was surprised by CASTORIA's power. In her Artoria Avalon form, she was able to greatly damage the spiritual core of Oberon Vortigern with the help of Mash. This was enough to incapacitate him and leave him to be swallowed with the rest of the Lost Belt. Mind you that at his best, Oberon could eventually destroy the entire world. Using her precognition, she was able to identify wood walls, knocking off the top half of her entire body and finding a way to circumvent this. In the domain of Nagnarea, she got a concussion by being attacked by her own chocolate monster and was still able to shrug it off when she was trapped in the Garden of Lost Will, which is a devastating bounded field that attacks you mentally by using your own weakness against you. CASTORIA was able to neutralize most of the effects because she didn't start off with a great will to begin with. In our fight against Cernunnos, she was able to fire 12 simultaneous Rongominias that she had acquired from Morgan, which took majority of her health, and then she turned around and did the impossible by firing 12 Excaliburs, thus sacrificing her life. This allowed her to get through 90% of Cernunnos' protective layer. Again, Cernunnos is also an entity that can destroy the entire planet. He is one of the hardest bosses in FGO and one of the strongest beings in the verse. She was fast enough to dodge the hammer that Hector tried to throw at her. You had Babin Sif mention that she was actually fast enough to dodge the Garden of Lost Will, but CASTORIA still jumped in front of it just for her to save Ritsuka and got trapped inside it along with him. She has an A-rank magic resistance. This allowed her to go through the Nameless Woods that is known to erase your memories for a great portion of time. Castoria was seen negating this. She was unaffected by being hit by Moors, the Moors being the soul of deceased fairies that usually can turn others. She was able to negate this as well. She has item construction B, mentioning that she would throw an entire bomb at Woodwolves if he got her mad enough. She has territory creation at EX, the highest level of creating a territory that you can have, being able to manifest her ideal version of Camelot. She has her fairy eyes at A rank, which are touted to be on a similar level of mystic eyes. This allows her to see the truth around both humans and fairies. Using this, she was able to identify that the fairies of Tintagel despised her from the time that she washed up on shore. They allowed her to negate a spell that was hiding Barget's true name in writing, and she still was able to see it. This let her see through the fact that Burrow was able to copy Woodwolves' spirit origin. It told her that Sir Gareth was a reincarnation of Ainzel, the last head of the Mirror clan. It also pointed out the fact that she would be the final bell for her pilgrimage. These also let her know that Odin was only around to make sure that she made it to Avalon and fulfilled her journey. In terms of humans, they told her that Ector had a hatred for fairies without him actually saying so. When Ector was severely wounded, the eyes were able to detect the fact that he was lying, claiming that it wasn't bad as it actually was. They gave her the ability to sense the number of heat sources at a ranch, letting her deduce the number of humans that were inside. They also allowed her to see through Pepe's illusion when he tried to say that his wounds weren't as bad either, showing how terrible they truly were. They gave her a feeling that her carriage was about to flip over in 5 seconds before it actually happened. Rasuka realizes that they're similar to Oberon's, Oberon being an extremely powerful being himself. Muramasa believes that she can see the karma in people. These were able to partly unveil a good portion of Oberon's lies. Castoria herself mentioning that she's been aware of his deceit for quite some time. They told her the truth about Percival when he tried to shove a situation under the rug. They revealed that it was actually a lie to cover Melusine. She has her B rank Charisma of Hope, a skill similar to Merlin's based on the fact that she's outside the human race. Using this, she was able to get rid of Oberon's spell of Lost Will that was restricting the Storm Border. You have her skill Avalon LaFay at A rank, which gives her the blessings of Avalon itself. Castoria mentioning that she's somewhere between fairy and human. When Pepe was able to read into her soul, he was able to realize that she was really the child of prophecy just by looking at her. Even Nocnerea had a gut feeling that Castoria can flip the entire world on its head if she really chose to. This was prior to the outcome of the pageant throwing her off. While Castoria was reflecting on her pan-human form, she mentions that she is the only one of her kind, one of one. Usually fairies hit a wall and they stop growing, but Castoria is different from the rest because she continues to evolve. Castoria brings up the fact that her and Ash, aka Morgan, are the same type of fairy, carrying a similar origin. You have her Sword of Selection, which is also at EX. This too is a skill that shows Castoria was fated to save Britain. From the story, we know that she was supposed to go to the Skyforge to create Excalibur, which would ultimately take the sacrifice of her own soul to accomplish. Despite this skill being able to out nearly any entity, Merlin tells us that it would still fail if Sir Nunnos got the upper hand. Before the idea was retconned by Nasu, she was in fact supposed to be the Grand Saber. This is further evidenced by the fact that she shows up as a Grand Saber in the game in the battle against Olga. From our conversations with Oberon, we know that she's able to handle Avalon's Night Crows without much problem. Even when she defeated Babin Sith back at the auction house, Castoria herself pointed out that Babin still had spells to use. That Castoria's magecraft was so terrifying that she just went into a shock where she didn't use them. Muramasa mentions that fighting alongside her makes him smoother in combat, which comes from their relationship back in Stay Night. Despite her complaints, she was able to spar with Muramasa and hold her own back when she was still regaining her power. She's proven to have great synergy on the field. When she fought alongside Sir Gareth, Sarah, Gareth herself praising her ability. Even at one of her lowest points, she was still able to deal with the Moors that were overrunning the area. Normally, these could take down people who aren't strong enough without issue. She's had a sparring match with Oberon, saying out her own mouth that she would beat his ass all the way up and down the field. In her spare time, she's known for doing some shadow boxing, so much so that it got her an eyewitness broadcast on the scene. After she had regained enough of her power, Da Vinci mentioned that she could take on any of the Fae Knights without issue. From 10 years prior, we know that she has an abundance of magecraft techniques that she learned from Oberon himself. This includes heating, detection, healing, linguistics, camouflaging herself, picking locks, greater ability at stealth, creating explosives, and creating obstacles. To show just how great Castoria's potential is, 2 years prior to us running into her, she didn't even have enough magical energy to take on a black dog, which is one of the lowest fairies that you can fight against. Castoria mentioned out her own mouth that half of her magecraft are things that she learned on her own right. She has summoning spells, that of which we've seen that she's able to make a pack of wild birds in an instant. She has bounded fields that allow her to ward off animals. These can last for multiple weeks at a time. Prior to her regaining her power, her magic circuits are still better than a human, but lower than the average fairy before getting to the bells. Da Vinci bringing up the fact that they have an Age of God-like pattern. You have Bargus mention that she can use the same type of magecraft as Morgan due to them coming from a similar background. She's been complimented by other fairies on her ability to make magical grenades, the fairy also mentioning that they fear for their life. From her Bond 10 voice lines, we know that she can create a retaliating curse that allows her to reciprocate feelings in the form of a magical attack. By using her staff to hoist herself up into the air, we know she has access to flight in her base form. She can use her staff to surge magical energy through the ground and make it go straight towards the enemy. She can shoot magical lasers from her staff at will. She can reinforce her energy through the ground and summon a pool of flames right under the enemy that cover a wide area. She can create multiple magical discs at one time and use them as projectiles as much as she pleases. In the story, we've seen her create fake command spells as a decoy against Bargus. This way she could save Ritsuka from using his own and have the fake ones just get absorbed as bait. She has the ability to reinforce her party's movement, making them faster than normal. This gave them the ability to keep up with the Fang clan, even considering that they had great speed themselves. Not only do the soldiers that she reinforced get faster, but they also hit harder than normal as well. The only drawbacks is that it doesn't go that far and it only lasts a certain amount of time. And this is before she got all of her buffs. By incorporating the use of her lockpick magecraft, she was able to get into Gloucester's tower. After she defeated Fairy Knight Tristan, this revealed her true name as Babin Sith. By reinforcing Muramasa, he was able to use his noble phantasm multiple times in a row, mentioning that he can use it at least 3 times back to back before decaying his spirit. Again, she has a bounded field that lets her ward off animals and insects at will. Using her unique magecraft, she was able to bring chocolate to life. Her creation was strong enough to start blowing up the building that they were in and turn other fairies into chocolate as well. She has protection spells that allowed her to ward off damage from her, Mash, Ritsuka, and Pepe at the same time. Odin mentioned that the only people that could stand up to Bargus and Melusine is either Castoria, Mash, or Ritsuka. After getting to a point where she realized her real power, Da Vinci says that Castoria is scary strong. She out her own mouth mentions that she's on the same level as a Lost Belt King. Bargus mentioned that her protection spells combined with Nocnarea's territory would be enough to put them on the same level as Morgan's base forces. She was able to sense Morgan's magical energy, allowing her to get around the distractions of manipulated buildings in the city. After journeying to Avalon's shadow, she was able to make a shield strong enough to block Albion's rays. Keep in mind that Albion is one of the strongest phantasmal creatures in Fate, period. When Castoria fired the 12 Rongo Minions and her 12 Excaliburs at Cernunnos, she was able to get past his defenses and reveal his divine core. Only a certain number of spirits would have been able to accomplish this. Given that she also had access to Morgan's Rongo Minions, we know that just one of her Rongos is even stronger than Wodamay's Magecraft in LB5, which put him at Age of Gods level. Just one of her Rongos could make a crater as wide as the pit that Cernunnos was buried in. We also know that they're capable of crossing dimensions based off Morgan from the time that she burned down the fantasy tree back in Olympus. Again, Castoria had used 12 of these at once, showing the lethalness of her, Morgan, and Cernunnos all at one time. And then you have even more feats from Artoria Avalon, Castoria's highest level as a heroic spirit. She has her mythological mystic code, Mormayados, one of the greatest armaments in the verse, originally belonging to Heracles. As I mentioned before, Mormayados was made by the god Hephaestus and is said to be stronger than Excalibur itself, which is already a top weapon to begin with. In her Avalon form, her other mystic codes include both Corwanon and Spumador. From her voice lines, we know that she was able to make a spell that's capable of decapitating Merlin, despite him actually being immortal and usually having the ability to negate this thanks to the way that his body is made. She can shoot crystal spears at will via telekinesis in this form. She can lock her crystal spears into the ground and charge multiple laser attacks that shower all over the enemies in front of her. She can imbue her Mormayados with heat energy, further increasing its strength, and use it as a projectile. This same heat energy can be seen when she's going in for an assault. She can manifest waves of energy straight out the ground with just a lift of her hand. Oberon mentions that her staff of selection would throw an enemy off due to its irregular design, the staff itself coming from the true Avalon. We know that she completed multiple of Oberon's quests, all of which being difficult if we're going by the word of Tristan. Beyond her other skills, she's also good at infiltration and making sleep potions. The story points out the fact that although they have a similar origin, Artoria is a distinctly different being from her in mindset. By revealing Barghest's true name, Castoria was actually able to nerf some of her Fey Knight power in their base forms. The sacred sword that she gave to our squad was later attached as a railgun to the Storm Border, a gun that would help us against one of our strongest adversaries. You have her phantasm around Caliburn, which is similar to a reality marble. It allows her to manifest a physical paradise like Avalon that strengthens the attack and the defense of everybody that's around her, but it only works on her allies. And then you have her phantasm Round of Avalon, which is another buff that bestows her teammates with the blessings of the round table. Using this, she was able to summon herself into the abyssal worm and moonwalk on Oberon at a point that shouldn't even be possible. Her ability to pull this off also confirmed that she can manipulate time and space itself. I mean, if you've been through Lost Belt 6, you already know what time it is. Easily one of the strongest spirits in Fate, some of the strongest mystic codes, spells. Her character is a calling to rectify the entirety of Britain itself, and this is before you get to her wielding her Rongos and her Excalibur. She's manipulating time and space. She's blocking attacks from beings that could devastate the planet. She's defeating entities that could outright destroy the planet, like Cernunnos and Oberon. And if we're being real, I don't even think we've seen half her power, considering she's only had one fight as Artoria Avalon. Gotta give her the EX, a goat among goats indeed.